Hello. Welcome. I'm April Cortez. You are in the Inclusion Works Creating Childcare Programs that Promote Belonging for Children with Disabilities session. Like I said, welcome. This particular presentation is for individuals that are maybe new to inclusion. They're wanting a place to start, not quite what to do. They have worries, that kind of thing. Of course, anybody who is of course, has lots of experience in inclusion, you are welcome as well. I just wanted to make you aware of what we plan to do here today. My name is April Cortez. I'm a professional development coach for the Child Care Resource Center. I'm also a trainer. I'm certified in the Beginning Together Inclusion Facilitator in the state of California. I'm also a certified zero to three growing brain certified trainer, as well as 0 to 3 faculty. I have 30 years of education field in the state of California and New Mexico. And before we go any further, I want to make sure my co-presenter has a chance to introduce herself.
Thank you. My name is Adriane. I work for Child Care Resource Center, and I am also certified in inclusion. I have worked in the child care field for over almost 12 years now. I have I have two daughters, a 12-year-old and a 4-year-old. So I always use them as my experiments as I go and as I learn as I go. So it does help with the hands-on. But yeah, I'm very excited to be here, and thank you for having us.
Okay, now it's time for you to introduce yourselves. If you're able to, go ahead and put your name. We want to know who's here. Go ahead and put your name, your maybe the place you live, and what program you work for, and what your title is. We are actually, I should have mentioned this, we are actually coming to you from Southern California. That's where the Child Resource Center is. In Southern California. We are in Chatsworth, California, but we actually work in the San Bernardino County. So that's where we are coming to you live from. I don't see any messages from the audience. That's okay. I don't know if it means that nobody's here or nobody is able to put anything in the chat. That's okay, no problem. We'll go ahead and move forward, and hopefully somebody will show up, or we'll just continue to pretend somebody's out there. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, looks like we have 11 in the session. So if you're able to, go ahead and put maybe where you're from. I just out of curiosity, because we're coming to you from Southern California, and I know the conference is more up north. We wish we could be there with you live, but you know how it is with finances, that kind of thing for agencies.
Okay, ready for the next one?
I don't see any names around. I don't know if that's mine or if that's Adriane's. Adriane, you can go ahead and move it. Okay. So the Map to Inclusion and Belonging website. This is going to be one of your greatest resources for those of you new to inclusion. It's geared toward providing resources to support child care providers and implementing inclusive practices for children with disabilities from birth to 21 years of age in their programs. It provides comprehensive resources related to children with disabilities, useful to families and professionals. It actively seeks to meet the needs of all stakeholders. It welcomes suggestions, questions,
I think
coordinator Cindy Erstein Kerslake also welcomes Dacia Rosas from Monterey County at the Early Learning Program. Thank you so much, Ms. Rosas, for being here with us today. Adriane, go ahead and move it forward. to the next slide. So this is the actual website. This is the California Map to Inclusion and Belonging website. And like I mentioned before, this is probably going to be one of your greatest resources, especially if you're starting out. I also recommend you get on the mailing list. They have a great newsletter that they send out. I'm not really sure if it's monthly or bi-monthly. All I know is that when it shows up in my email, I'm excited because I see all kinds of great new resources and ideas that I can share with the teachers and educators that I coach. So this is a great website. We'll have that in the Padlet that we'll be talking about soon. Go ahead, Adriane. Next slide. So the information in this particular PowerPoint is from Inclusion Works. So so this is important. We need to know, you should have access to the Inclusion Works resource book and the training materials provided. Are you able to access that? If not, this is what we're going to be using for the whole presentation. And it might be helpful if you have that in front of you so that you can go along with this. But if not, that's okay too. Is anybody having problems accessing that particular resource book or the resources for this particular session? Any difficulties? Okay. So if anybody is having difficulties accessing the resources, let us know, because these will actually be in the Padlet we're going to be sharing with you. We plan to do that at the end, but if people are having difficulty accessing the materials for this session, we want to go ahead and share that with you now so that you can use the materials as they come up in the presentation. Please let us know if that's a problem. Oh, she's trying to access them now. Thank you, Tasha or Tazia. I know I'm saying your name wrong. I apologize. Tazia. Tasia. It's a really pretty name. I will say that because this PowerPoint is from Inclusion Works, it is focused on defining inclusive practices, it's driving collaboration and sharing practical strategies, which is the best part of the presentation, of course. It's intended for use in childcare settings for children birth through age 12. The resources included in the appendices as well as web links are on the Map to Inclusion and Belonging website, the one that I just mentioned earlier. This particular resource book has recently been updated to a second edition. So if you have the first one, guess what? There's a second edition. Oh, thank you, Tasia. Okay, think Fantasia without the fan. Okay, Tasia Rosas. Thank you, Tasia. That's a pretty name. Thank you so much. I'm hoping you're able to access the resource book, Tasia. Let us know if you're unable to do that so that we can share a Padlet with you if needed. Okay, Adriane. So the chapters in this Inclusion Works resource book, the information or resources provided in the resource book are designed to support efforts to make early learning and care programs accessible and inclusive, of course. It starts out with chapter 1, Understanding Inclusion, and it says on here, important to read, and there's a reason for that. A lot of times you kind of skip over and try and get to the good stuff, but really the chapter 1 provides that foundation for the rest of the book. So you'll want to make sure that you read chapter 1. Okay, I think, let's see, I'm trying to look on here.
Oh, good.
Oh, good. She has the book downloaded and printed already. Please share the Padlet. Okay. We're able to do that. I don't know, Adriane, are you able to maybe send that to our, to Jenna? Maybe she can.
Yes,
I don't know.
I will work on that really quick.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll go ahead and continue here. So chapter 2,
Oops. Okay, I don't want to move it. Just kidding. I don't want to move nothing.
Oopsie.
Yeah, we'll send it after.
Oh yeah, we'll do that afterwards. You will get it for sure, Tazia. So the second chapter is including children with disabilities or other special needs. There's a rationale in it. Chapter 3 is comparing inclusive childcare and quality childcare settings. 4 is creating inclusive childcare programs. 5 is identifying and finding help. 6 is collaborating for inclusion. 7 are examples of inclusive childcare strategies. And then, of course, there's the appendices. Okay, Adriane. Oh my gosh, I think I just got kicked out of my internet and went right back on. Okay. Um, Chapter 1 highlights. Okay, sorry about that. So again, chapter 1 provides that foundation for the rest of the book. Understanding inclusion, it sets the tone of the book. It includes definitions of terms. I also want to let you know that I put in the Padlet a handout on acronyms that are used in special ed. I thought that might be appropriate. That might be really helpful as well, in case they come up during an IEP or that kind of thing. They're great for that. This new edition also references the Division for Early Childhood, the National Association for the Education of Young Children, their Inclusion Joint Position Statement. It talks about 3 principles of early childhood inclusion to be utilized. Okay, sorry about that. To be utilized collectively in identifying high quality early childhood program services. And those 3 key areas are access, participation, and support. You hear a lot about that in inclusion and working with children with disabilities, that sort of thing. We'll go a little bit deeper into that right now for the next slide. So those key elements or key principles. So for access, the universal design for learning principles and practices are, they help to ensure that every young child has access to learning environments, to typical home or educational routines and activities, and to the general education curriculum. Participation, depending on the individual needs and priorities of young children and families. Implementing inclusion involves consideration of a range of approaches, anything from embedded instruction and routines-based teaching to more explicit interventions such as scaffolding, learning, and participation for all children. So for supports, there should be a well-planned infrastructure in place, should be systems level, supports to back up and support the efforts of individuals and organizations that are providing inclusive services to children and families. And individuals in the organizations need to be aware of the systems of support available to them. Because I can't tell you the number of times I have worked with educators who tell me when I ask them about a process, they say, I don't know. I don't know if we have one. So that tells me that they're unfamiliar that there's one that even exists, because I do work with districts, so I know they have something in place. So it's really important for educators to be aware of those supports that are there for them. Okay, Adriane. So the belonging is strengthened and enhanced through those 3 elements of access, participation, and support. This is a checklist. This is a great little tool for self-assessment based on the 3 elements of access, participation, and supports. You can use it to assess your program's inclusive practices for young children. The indicators will help you think about and plan for ways to promote authentic belonging in your setting. So think about or discuss with your teaching team as you consider each step. It's divided up into the 3 key principles of access, participation, and supports. And you will find this in the resources for this session, which is also in the Padlet. It's also in the resources as well. Okay. So chapter 2 is a rationale. So turning children away from an early learning and care program solely because they have a disability or delay is a violation of the Americans with the Disability Act and the California's Unruh Civil Rights Act. Unfortunately, families continue to be routinely refused opportunities to enroll simply because their child has a disability. And that's even when their child does not need any special accommodations. All children and families want to be accepted and included in their communities, regardless of ability. They want to truly belong. But the kind of belonging they desire goes beyond just simply being together, you know, being in the same classroom. There's more to it. They want full, unconditional Norman Cook is actually a great and authentic belonging. Um, Unfortunately, we didn't add a video to our presentation because, as you can probably might be able to tell, we're having a little difficulty with our internet systems where we're from, unfortunately. But you can look up his name, Norman Kunk, Kunc. He's really awesome. You can find that in YouTube, or maybe we can even upload it to the Padlet later on. Um, so benefits happen for all. In fact, the policy statement on inclusion of children with disabilities in early childhood programs, there's a scientific base for the benefits of inclusion. It's laid out with several references that speak to the actual research. So not only do children with all types of disabilities benefit and thrive in inclusive settings, there are some studies that have shown that children of settings make greater gains than similar children in separate special education classrooms. In addition, children who are typically developing also benefit from interactions with children with disabilities or delays. About differences and about respecting and valuing steps too as well. I totally have seen this in action. My nephew was diagnosed with ASD when he was 3, and his first he went to kindergarten last year, and I was really worried because she said that he was actually going to classroom with 3 other children who also had varying ASD as well, and it was going to be in an inclusive classroom. The teacher was highly skilled, and my sister was so pleased, and I was so grateful as well to know that there are individuals out there working with children who make an effort to make sure children belong in the classroom. My nephew Bowie, he created some really great friends too, and he actually just started first grade this year. So anyway, over half and that's 58% of California children up to age 14 identified as having disability qualifying for special education service. They actually have delays in learning and communication. And that is in Appendix D of the resource book, where it has some data in there for the state of California. There are fewer children with more significant disabilities like physical and mobility impairments or multiple disabilities. When children do have significant disabilities, they're likely to be already receiving specialized services, which may then be access to support success in an early learning and care setting. Um, Learning about individual children is really the most important concept here. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But when serving an individual child, it's more important to focus on the specific. I'll talk a little bit more about that. When Adrian is frozen,
There.
there it
You
goes.
keep going in
Come
and
on.
out a little bit.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm actually seeing my little indicator here is yellow. So it's telling me my internet isn't doing so great. I apologize for that. But so go ahead and okay. Can you see the, oh, go ahead and put them all up. Yeah. So fear is actually the biggest barrier here. Not fear of the child, but fear for the child. And I get this because I remember I was like, for a long time, I was like, am I going to do things right? Am I going to mess up? Am I going to, cause trauma for the child? Mess up, and maybe I'm not qualified, not good enough, and there's all these scary things behind us, and that's actually that fear that is the biggest barrier. With knowledge, the fear will eventually fade, and your confidence will emerge on daily. It will do that on a regular basis, on and on. I don't see the last point there, but you can be successful at including children with
Oh,
disabilities or other special needs in your program. You can do this. Okay, Adrienne. And according to Marie Curie, nothing in life is to be feared, it is only to be understood. So if we look at it that way, then we're going to be okay, right? Okay, go ahead, Adrienne. So, can I include children? Absolutely. And you probably already are. And here are some things to know. You probably will not need to make major modifications to your program to do so. You may have already started doing this and not realizing, hey, this is part of inclusive strategies. These are inclusive. I'm creating an inclusive environment already. You may be able to receive assistance and support for the changes you do need to make. And you'll find that building an inclusive childcare program will be rewarding for all the children, families, and staff in your childcare program and you. And I remember once hearing a teacher, early childhood education teacher, say, working to build an inclusive childcare program has made me a better teacher. And I agree. I see that. I'm also reliable in class, which is a assessment system which assesses the interactions between teachers, educators, and children. And I see really high scores for individuals who implement those inclusive strategies. So that's just a side point, and I admit that's anecdotal. That's just what I've observed. So okay, go ahead, Adrian. I mean, it's about belonging. So let's focus on belonging for a few seconds here. Think for a moment of time in your life when you didn't fit in or felt as though you were different or separate. It could be a recent or distant memory. Maybe you just moved. Maybe you had braces. Maybe you were a teenager. At some point, this has happened in your life. And I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about that. I was going to give 30, but I don't know if I have that much time. Maybe 15 seconds.
can we go the next one, April?
Yeah.
Let me put them all out.
Okay. Gosh, I had my timer on 30 minutes. So for this period in your life, think about what feelings did you experience during this time? Did anything happen that made you either fit in or become comfortable with your uniqueness or your differentness? What did others do to support you during this time? Or what do you wish people had done? Um, and you can, if you're comfortable, go ahead and because I know this is kind of a hard subject to remember or to have those bad memories and stuff. But if you feel comfortable answering one of the questions, go ahead and input that into the chat. You can answer one of the questions. And I think we have a little bit of a delay, so let's see.
I'll keep an eye on the chat box.
I don't see any comments, so this is the reason to think about this is because we want to consider the child, what the child is going through when they come to your classroom. It could be a child with disabilities, even a child without disabilities. They want to feel like they belong somewhere. What are we doing to help them feel that way so they don't have those bad memories that maybe we have? Maybe when maybe we felt like we weren't included, or we have a good memory when someone included us and how it felt to have that support or have a friend or that kind of thing. We want children to feel like that when they come into our classrooms as well. So that's the idea: is put yourself in the shoes of the child and make sure that you are helping this child truly feel like he or she belongs in the classroom. Okay. And you want to focus on the individual child. Teachers want to learn everything they can about, especially when you first begin to start thinking about inclusion. You have a child who I worked for Head Start at the time. I remember we had a child who was diagnosed, and I thought, okay, well, I need to learn everything I can about this particular everything about it. And I felt like that afterwards. I felt like, okay, I need to learn everything about autism, cerebral palsy. Because I don't feel like I didn't feel like I was prepared. So I focus totally on the disability and not the individual child. And that's what's important. There's such a variability in how disability impacts an individual child. No one could ever know everything. So it's best to get to know the child and talk with the parents and the family members. So when a family a good follow-up question can be, how does the condition affect the child's development? What has worked at home or in community settings? Or what are the child's preferences and activities and having fun? Because you want to find out how to help that children belong. You really don't need to know specifics about a particular disability because, again, there's such variation in how children are being treated or how they're the plans that are in place with an IEP or IFSP. You can't know possibly everything. So get to know that particular child. That's what's important. Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to look at Chapter 3 highlights. In Chapter 3, it compares inclusive childcare and quality childcare. So it really goes in deep about the difference of those. It also looks at the quality is the foundations of providing inclusive care. Programs can promote their inclusive practice. So again, you want to make sure that when you are in doing that inclusive practice, we're letting parents know, hey, we want to make sure every child is seen as, their selves. Every child is seen as a person, and that we're all welcomed in our classroom. So going over that, promoting inclusive practice. And it also talks about, in the new revised edition, universal design. Okay, so now we're going to look at also Chapter 3 talks about the keys of quality. So I will give you a minute or two just to read over the keys to quality. And if you can, maybe just highlight or, put in the chat box something that just stands out to you. Or if you want, you can unmute yourself. Just jot down something that stands out to you in this section. Is there anything that stands out? Anything that you want to highlight? In that section, some of my takeaways, I do like how it talks about in a high quality program, teachers engage children with learning strategies that are tailored to the age of the child and use appropriate curriculums to structure the learning experiences. So I really like that, right? Because again, keys to quality is that teacher is going above and beyond to making sure that child, that individual is seen in that classroom and things are tailored to them, right? So we're not giving them something that's too hard for them or something that's too easy. It's geared specifically towards them. So again, this is also in the book. It's very good to go back and, look over this just to see the quality of a quality childcare. Next Chapter 3 talks about for children with disabilities and their key indicators. It talks about a positive and healthy learning environment. So what that looks like to a child, what a positive and a healthy learning environment is. The right number and mix of children and adults. So it goes over ratios, what that looks like. Trained and supported personnel. So again, you're not going to want to put someone that's brand new on their first day in a classroom all by themselves with new kiddos, right? It talks about what that looks like as trained supported personnel and how it should be in the classroom. A developmental focus on the child, and also how parents should be treated as partners, because again, parents are their first caregivers, right? So the parents know the ins and outs. The parents know how to gauge that child, maybe if the child is upset, or how to bring that child back down. So again, reaching out to those parents to get that support so we can again help their child as best as we need, and keeping them as partners in our class. Then we look at universal design. Universal design is a term that means a concept or philosophy for designing and delivering product and services that are usable by people with the wildest possible range of functional capabilities. So it goes into what universal design is, what that means, and how we should use that in our classroom. Um, it also talks about the services that are also aligned with our classroom, and how we can also better support the teachers when doing the lesson plans and curriculums. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So this is the next picture I absolutely love, because here we see this kid trying to go up the wheelchair ramp that's covered in snow. And he says, "Could you please shovel the ramp?" And the guy tells him, "All the other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, then I will come clear the ramp for you." Well, then the kid in the wheelchair says, "But if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in." So again, clearing a path for people with special needs means clears the path for everyone. So sometimes we forget, just because it's wheelchair accessible, that it doesn't mean it's only for a child with a wheelchair that has to get up there, right? That means everybody can use it. And if that man want to put in perspective, oh, you're right. If I was to clear the snow off of this side, everybody making you wait or making them wait. So putting it into perspective, what can you do to make everybody feel welcomed? Everyone meets their needs, not just a child with special needs, or not children without special needs. How we can do it as a whole in a classroom. So I love this picture. It really puts it in perspective when you look at this. Okay, next. So next we look at universal design for learning, and what does that mean? So we're going to look at what multiple means of engagement means, multiple means of representation, multiple means of demonstration. And again, it goes over the environment, the curriculum, and activities that are inclusive for everyone. So just like that ramp, just because it's a ramp for someone that has a wheelchair doesn't mean only those children with a wheelchair can use it. It's what everyone can use in that classroom. So here we're looking at a handout, and these handouts are also in the Padlet, so you'll be able to use them as well. When we look at these, we look at the brain, right? And we know that there's no brain that is average, right? No brain is the same. The variability is a dominant feature of the nervous system, just like our fingerprints. There is no two fingerprints that are the same. There is no two brains that are alike. Each brain is complex, interconnected web that is sculpted and influenced by the genetics and interactions with that environment. Variability can be overwhelming for educators, so who are planning for dozens of children to learn each day. The good thing is learner variability is predictable and can be organized across 3 brain networks targeted by the Universal Design Framework. It looks at the effectiveness, the recognition, and the strategicness of it. The concept of the neurovariability is important for educators because it reminds us that learners do not have an isolated learning style, right? So not one child is going to learn one specific way, but it relays on many parts of the brain working together to get that function within that context. So when we look at the green part, that is the engagement. The engagement is the way we learn, which aligns with the affective networks. So that looks at the interests, the efforts, the persistence, and the self-regulation. When we look at the purple part, that talks about the representation. That is the what of the learning, which aligns with the recognition networks. That's the perception, the language and symbols, and the comprehension. And the last one is the actions and expression. So again, that is the how of the learning, which aligns with the strategic networks and the physical action, expression, and communication, and the executive function. So again, not every child is going to learn one specific way. Not maybe every two children are going to learn this specific way. So knowing how to use this when creating a lesson plans or creating activities, we're going to be able to learn how to target all of the children and making sure they're all included when we're doing an activity. Again, this handout is also in the Padlet, so you will be able to have your own handout where you can print out, really look at it, and get a better understanding of it as well. The next one we look at is key questions to consider when planning lessons. So again, this one also is in the Padlet, so you have a bigger and full version. It's also on the CAST website, which is another great resource tool that we did put in the Padlet that you guys hopefully can look at and use and get familiar with. This one also, again, is for the teachers want to consider when they're looking for their lesson plan. So again, it talks about how the green part will talk about, think about how learners will engage with this lesson. That focuses on, does that lesson provide options that can help all learners? So when you're doing a lesson, you're going to say, is everybody able to regulate their own learning? Are they able to sustain efforts and motivation and engage and interest all learners? And maybe as you're going through that table and you got an activity and you're like, oh, this is perfect. But then when you start looking at this, you're like, maybe it isn't great for child A, child B, and child D. Maybe let me see if I can switch that around. Then we look at the purple part. It says, think about how the information is presented to learners. So again, does the information provide options that help all learners? Does it reach higher levels of comprehension and understanding that the symbols and expressions, and perceive what needs to be learned? And the last part says, think about how learners are expected to act strategically and express themselves. So again, another thing to say is, does this activity provide options that help all learners? Are they able to act strategically, express themselves fluently, and physically respond? So again, it's another great handout and definitely something to think about. Let's see. Okay, and then chapter 4. Chapter 4 goes into the highlights that provide factors that support inclusion. So here is when it goes over the visions and the champions that help. It talks about the success that happens child by child and day by day, right? Because we all know if we want something to succeed, it's not going to happen overnight, and not every child is going to get it right away. So again, how it breaks it down, child by child and day by day. Then it introduces common modifications, adaptations, and support. We'll also go into this later as well. April, is this on you?
Okay. I had you. That's okay.
Oh, just kidding.
No, it's okay. So creating a culture of inclusion and belonging, you want to start with the assumption that all children are competent. Adapt the environment so that it's accessible, developmentally appropriate, challenging, and based on the needs and interests of children. You would be doing that anyway, right? So this just provides more of an inclusive classroom when considering these, as well as it becomes a high quality classroom. While there may be a need to support a child's mastery of a specific skill, keep the whole child in mind, particularly the child's social emotional experience, because that's important, because that is what stays with you, all your life. When you get old, you remember that social emotional, those feelings, those experiences that you've had. Okay. So, questions to ask as you make modifications. Effective inclusive programs begin with high quality, developmentally appropriate foundations. So, ask yourself the questions here um, on the slide. Does the child have an opportunity to be in control of the learning experience? Is there a balance between adult initiated learning and child initiated learning? Can the child make choices while learning the skill? Is the child able to initiate his or her own efforts to practice the skill with support given by the child care provider? Is the child initiating and participating in activities with their peers? Is the child gaining self confidence and showing the joy of accomplishment while learning? Is there a room in the act? Is there room in the activity for the child to make discoveries? These are things you would ask yourself in any high quality um, early childhood classroom. So these are things to consider as well when you're making modifications. Okay. Chapter 5 highlights. Chapter 5 discusses identifying and finding help for the child and the staff in the setting. Early learning and care providers are often the first to notice a child who is learning, communicating, or developing in a way that's different than the other children in their care. Or a child care provider may be the first person who family members approach with their concerns that they have. When a critical difference is noted and careful observation and efforts to work effectively with a particular child don't seem to be meeting the child's needs, the next step, it does involve looking for additional help to foster belonging for the child and to appropriately support the child in an early learning and care program. This is an important chapter because it provides information in great detail on how to address concerns with families, making a referral, supporting the family that want access to services, and supporting a family that chooses to not access services. Finding resources for families, responsibilities of local education, local special education, and early intervention service systems, communicating with parents of other children and talking with children about differences. This is in great detail, and I think this is a really great guide for people new to inclusion as well. Okay.
Sorry, my mouse gets stuck.
Oh. So, chapter 6 highlights the primary role of an early learning care provider is to nurture and support the child's development in a loving and caring manner. Partnerships formed with other adults who are caring for the child, that's the parents, healthcare providers, specialists, they all can complement the efforts of all concerned, especially when everyone concentrates on what they do best. When various expert viewpoints combine together, ideas develop and strategies emerge that are better than those any one person could have developed. This is the essence of true collaboration. You know, they used to always say two heads are better than one, multiple brains are better than one. Successful collaboration elements. So the above elements are essential for successful collaboration. Family members are the provider's first and best resources. They should be included in the planning and implementation of care for their children. They know their child best. They are their child's first teacher. So they're going to know the child, so they need to be involved in it. Um, Two, planned meetings and informal conversations are arranged with everyone involved in a child's development. The commitment to collaboration includes an understanding that making the time to plan, interact, communicate, and evaluate will actually save time in the long run. So everybody's busy. We know that. Families are busy. We're busy with our jobs. We're all trying to keep it together. But having that commitment to collaboration that will benefit the child, making that time for it and being present is important for that particular child, for the benefit of that child and that family. All early learning and care providers need to be actively involved in developing the inclusive program and feel a personal interest in the success of that program. If teachers support inclusive practices, but the program administrators don't, I mean, all everything that you do, all your valiant efforts are not likely to be successful without that support of administration involved. Um, if a child is eligible for specialized services, an early learning and care provider can and should participate in an IFSP or IEP meeting, and in the planning and delivery of services if a parent requests the provider's participation. Additional suggestions for ways to access and utilize specialists are included in Chapter 5, identifying concerns and finding help. Also covered in this particular chapter are ways to contribute to collaboration, what specialists can do in childcare settings, and coordination with specialists and families. Okay. Chapter 7 are the common modifications, adaptations, and supports in order of use in the preschool classrooms. So, this particular chapter offers several case studies that illustrate the unique strategies different programs have used to meet the needs of their children in their program, the child in their program. The studies that the case studies that are involved here, they're actually real ones. They're based on real children. Of course, names have been changed and all that. But the studies were designed and put in the book to inspire and encourage early learning and care providers who are working to develop inclusive settings. The appendices highlights. The appendices that are involved, Appendix A is the laws that apply, federal and California laws that I mentioned at the beginning. They'll go into greater detail. Appendix B is the glossary. It includes definitions of special education terms, which are important. Appendix C is a sample forms, an agreement form for consultation, a letter for families when supporting a child. Appendix D is enrollment in special education. And then, of course, there are the December 2019 California data in case that's stuff that you are interested in. It is involved. Now, for the best part of this particular session, I feel Adriane is going to give you some sampling and examples of what are being done in classrooms.
Perfect. Okay, so if you're following along in the book, you can go back to Chapter 3. This is where it covers the modifications, and then again Chapter 7, like April said, that shows the actual examples of in classrooms and the real stories, again, that they changed their names, but there's some, it goes more in depth. So the first one we're looking at is the environmental support. This is the altering the physical and social and temporal environment to promote participation, engagement, and learning. So first we have individual workspace. So this, you can give the child trays, you can give them a spot for them, a defined area for them to use. So children are better able to focus more likely on what's in front of them and where to also, put their hands at. You might have some children who, might take some other things from people or have a hard time with focusing on what's in front of them. So giving that designated workspace. Next would be arranging small groups for activities. This happens, teaching happens best, of course, when it is in smaller groups. But we know that's not always possible, or it's not just accessible at all times. So again, knowing your age groups or knowing the children in your classroom will better help, because you might have someone who is a leader. You might have someone who loves to help and support their friends. So again, knowing which children might need it and putting them in those groups. So that way, they're able to help their friends if needed and giving that extra support. And the next one is allow free flow between group activities. So this gives a way for a child who needs extra time to have it. A child who finishes quickly can move on. So sometimes we see in a classroom there is an activity going on and nobody can get up until everybody is done, and then we move to the next activity. But sometimes when we do that, we might have a kid or two who it loves to take their time. They like to put it exactly in a row. It has to be straight and it has to be perfect just for them, which is completely fine. But rather than giving that child that stress or that anxiety that they have to finish because everyone else is finished, allowing that free flow helps them know, okay, everyone else can go play, or, they're done, they can go play and I can join them after. So that way they know I don't have to hurry up and rush or just stop because my friends are done. Allowing that free range. Next, we go to materials adaptations. This is modifying materials to promote independence. So stabilizing materials. We can put tape on paper and tape it to the wall, tape it to the table, whatever is needed to better support that child with holding that paper down for them will give them that extra support. We also have um, the clips as well. So if they're doing manipulatives or small toys and they're trying to line them up or match them, but they just can't get it, giving them that support with those extra clips to hold their papers down will help them as well. Next, we have modifying materials. So you can use tape or foam and put them on the bottom of the pencils to make it easier for those children who might have a trouble with grasping. And the next one would be to get the plastic slips and putting like a cardstock paper or heavy paper in there to hold that paper for them. So that way they're able to hold that the sleeve easier than a paper. And next, we have adapt materials for sensory differences. So we might have a child in a classroom who does not like the feel of the pom-pom balls or who does not like to mix paint. They don't like that texture on their hands. Instead of excluding them from that activity, we want to make sure we're able to adapt it. So putting it around tape so where they can still touch it, they can still feel it, but they're not getting dirty. Or we might have a child in our classroom who has a hard time with vision. Instead of, again, excluding them from an activity, giving them something with that textile feel, letting them feel what that ball feels like, talking to them through what they're touching. So that way they're still part of that activity and they're still getting that involvement. Next, we have activity simplification. So simplifying a complicated task by breaking it into smaller parts or reducing the number of steps. So breaking a task into smaller parts. So we might have a child who, we might have a teacher who could say, okay, I need you to pick up the Play-Doh, put the Play-Doh down, open it, and grab your favorite color. Well, that child is processing it way too much and it's too hard for them to understand. So maybe handing that child that Play-Doh, asking them, which Play-Doh do you want? Letting them pick it and then telling them that next step. Or we might have to give them a sequence card. Giving them that sequence card, they're able to see what comes next. So it gives them that better understanding, that visual. Change or reduce the number of steps. So again, maybe we are doing, we're playing in the house area and it is time to clean up. And you know, there's a few children who have a hard time with putting the toys back where they got them. So one way you could do that is instead of saying, okay, go find the toys that match the basket, right? Sometimes that's a little bit hard for them too. Well, we can get a basket and put the bread in the basket and say, okay, this is a basket for the food. Can we all put the food in the basket? That way they have a visual that goes along with it. You're able to support them. And the next one is after breaking down a task, have a child do that last step. So again, if that child is, you know, you're telling them what to do, they might still have a hard time doing it, but you still want them to be included, have them do maybe that last step. So for lunchtime or snack time, you have that child pick up their plates, push in their chairs, pick up their plates and go dump it in the containers. Well, that might be too much for them. So maybe you can have that child pick up that plate and go help them go dump that plate. That way, again, they're still included. They're still doing that activity, but we're working at their pace. We're giving them that extra support that's needed. The next one is child preference. So capitalizing on a child's favorite activities. So allowed preferred toys or photos if needed. So we might have a child who loves to do puzzles, um, and we want to make sure we're supporting them, but they don't want to come to the group where we're at. Maybe we can get that puzzle and bring it closer to that group so they're able to experience still the group setting, but still able to play with their toy. And hopefully, gradually, we can start getting them to play with the group. The next one would be the photos. I love photo walls. I encourage all of my teachers to have photos in their classrooms. because again, it gives that child that safe space to where if they're ever sad or if they're ever, they just want to see a familiar face, they have that wall to go to. They know where their family's pictures are at. They can get that extra visual support to maybe help them keep going in their day. Next, we have incorporate a favorite or preferred item to play with. So again, if they love dinosaurs and they just don't want to come and count bears, maybe you want to add dinosaurs to counting. Have them count something that they want to count. And maybe you're lining up tallest to smallest and they don't want to use cars and they love dinosaurs, add dinosaurs to your settings. Get them to be involved, especially with something they like. Assign a favorite person or less preferred for less preferred activities. So again, if you know a child wants to play but is having a hard time because they know that teacher is just not the one that they cling to the most, getting them to incorporate in those groups while that teacher is there. Or also maybe have them sitting next to their favorite peer or teacher or whoever it may be, and getting them to feel more comfortable as they start exploring those other options in the classroom, making them feel more comfortable. Special equipment, so using adaptive devices to facilitate the participation. So ensure stable seating. So if a child likes to sit at the table and they have a hard time, giving them that extra support with their armrest. Or if there's a child that does not hit the floor, giving them that extra support with their feet, putting something under for them to feel comfortable. Ensure that a child in a wheelchair has other options. So again, connecting with those parents, with those IEPs, those specialists to see if a child is able to come out of their wheelchair, how can we best support them with other options? And increase access to play indoors and outdoors. So again, if a child is in a wheelchair, making sure they have those toys accessible to them at the tables. But also, if they can come out of that wheelchair or if they need that extra support on the ground, giving them something comfortable to sit on to have that more support. Number 6 is adult support. So direct adult interventions to support child's efforts. So model and encourage new or extended ways to play. So again, if you see that child playing with the blocks, but he's using it as a phone, pick up that phone next to him and call him, get him to talk, get him to interact with you. Because trust me, they will go. If they're in their moods, they're in their minds, they will keep going. Or also giving them that visual support. So in block area, at the bottom, I circled the pictures. So that way, if they're playing with blocks and they need support of what a tower looks like, they can visually see that as well. High co-regulating and scaffolding at play. So again, if a child is playing at the table but still having a hard time connecting with friends, getting them to connect more with their peers, playing with them, kind of getting them to join that group that's going on. And then if you see a child who is having a hard time, he looks like he's going to question his next steps or he's just about to get upset, try to join in before that child gets to that step. Try to get him to relax. Try to get him to talk it out before it gets there. And focus on finding times when the child is engaging in appropriate behaviors and acknowledge and encourage it. So again, you might have a list of what that child should be doing at that desk. Once that child does it, acknowledge it, encourage it, encourage those friends to say, good job. Susie was able to raise her hand without talking out loud, right? They want to hear that they did good, just like we do. And the last one is peer support. So using classmates as models to help children learn. Again, using that buddy system. They love their friends. They love that support. So pairing them up with their friends to gauge them to that support. Prepare play partners. So if you already know a child is going to have a hard time and wants to veer off by themselves, getting their friends to join them in an activity that they're doing will help them open up, will help them, use their words, communicate, and to start wanting to have that peer support rather than being alone. And encourage children to positively to guide them. So again, when they're doing great, let them know they're doing great. Tell them they're doing great and have those children participate in those activities because they want to feel like you're watching them. They want to know that they're being seen. Oh, I like one more. And the invisible support. So sequence trends to maximize the child's success. So Again, with Play-Doh, you want to let them help you before it gets too hard and they can't mix it enough. Or if you have a child who is learning how to pour, maybe have them pour last so that way they don't spill their cups. Plan ahead to guide activities and choices. So if you know a child's always going to go to block area, maybe give them that choice board so that way they can know they have other options than just the blockboard. Give them that support. Also, that last activity is also in our Padlet, and I wanted to hurry up so we don't run out of time, and I wanted to say thank you. We did add the Padlet again for resources. Everything is in there, and if you ever want to add anything, you guys are more than welcome to approve it so that way everyone's able to see the resources. Thank you again for joining. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.